a bleak report card. Joining us now, MS Now political analyst and host of the Fast Politics podcast, Molly Jong-Fast, Yale Law School professor and president of the Budget Lab at Yale, Natasha Sarin, and former congressman and host of The Social Contract with Joe Walsh. Natasha, the president has been touting and trying to remind voters of the no tax on tips, of the Trump accounts, and some of the other accomplishments that he's at least trying to get out ahead of. But is any of that going to cut through when you have people paying what they're paying at the pump, when you have the looming Iran war that could drive inflation even higher?
Yeah. You know, what's interesting is my colleagues at the Budget Lab at Yale, we actually calculated the impact of for the average American family of the combination of the president's tax cuts, which did result in greater refunds of around $350 for the average family. But then when you add tariffs to that, that's an increase in about $1,100 in household prices.
So it doesn't offset.
It doesn't offset. And then you add the cost of the Iran war and what's that's doing to energy prices, which is another $400 for households. And so in aggregate, what the reality is what you're hearing from those commentators, which is that things are getting more expensive for them. And we're actually in a situation in this economy, which is called negative wage growth. The reality is inflation is outpacing wage gains that are happening for the average worker.
So, Molly, you know, we heard from Americans out there who are hurting, who are frustrated. The president clearly doesn't want to believe it, or at least if he understands these polls are out there, he's not wanting to let them sink in. He says it's the greatest economy ever. But Americans say the economy is either poor or at least not so good. And Americans are blaming him. They are laying this at his feet. Overwhelming majority disapprove of his handling on things like inflation, the economy overall, gas prices. His overall approval ratings, as we've been discussing ad nauseum, are in the toilet, so to speak. Trump might dismiss all of this, but how can they ignore this, especially as you have the midterms approaching?
Right. I mean, we're less than 100 days from the midterms. So we are basically in the beginning of the midterm cycle now, right? Primaries are almost over. Look, the president is always blamed for the economy. That is a totally nonpartisan fact. Left, right, doesn't matter. Always the president is blamed. It happens to be, in this case, that Donald Trump did a couple of things he campaigned that he wasn't going to do, like foreign wars, that have made things, and tariffs, that have made things more expensive. So you actually have a direct line. And I think for him, the most problematic thing might be the war in Iran, because you can put a direct line between the moment that Donald Trump went into Iran and gas prices going up. And you've even seen him say, like, we're making peace with Iran, and then gas prices go down a little bit. And then there's more firing in the Straits, and then gas prices go up. So you really can see how much his military action has affected the
There's
price.
A direct line A to B.
Yeah, of filling up your car with gas.
Yeah, and the discussion around tariffs can be a little bit more obscure and nuanced, and this one is a really easy line to draw. Joe, if Trump is just going to ignore the blaring alarm bells on all of this polling, on the economy, is he a liability for Republicans in November?
Yeah, but they have to go down with him. He's the Titanic, and every single Republican has to go down with him. Look, can we just lay out the broad context here? Donald Trump lies as he breathes. I mean, every president spins the economy. Trump out and out lies. He lies about everything. And see, when he lies about the 2020 election was stolen, a lot of people believe him. That lie will work. When he lies and says Haitian migrants were eating cats and dogs, that lie will work because a lot of people will believe him. But when Donald Trump lies about the economy, those lies won't work because, as your two guests just said, we all live the economy. We all know how much we're paying at the pump. We all know how much groceries cost. So Trump's lies about the economy simply will not work with most voters. And I got to be honest, I talk to MAGA voters every day. His lies about the economy aren't really working with them either.
So to the core question here, though, what can Republicans do as they're out there on the campaign trail? You have these crucial races, like, for instance, Mike Rogers in Michigan. Are they going to be able to gently distance themselves from the president when it comes to the economy without taking him off?
No, they're going to echo his lies. What makes me so sad about my former political party is now for 10 years now, they've watched Trump lie about everything, and he's never paid a price for that. So Republicans have learned to imitate him. So they're all going to double down and say things are great. They're all going to double down and say the economy's just fine. They'll try to avoid talking about it as much as Trump does, but they won't refute Trump's lies.
Natasha, members of the administration seem to be also trying to ignore the polling. You have Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on CNBC saying that the gap between rich and poor is dead. Let's listen.
I got sick of hearing about this K-shaped economy. I can say here definitively the K-shaped economy is over, and we're seeing more of a C economy where the lower end of wage earners are finally calling it back, just like they did in President Trump's first term.
He may be sick of it, but Moody's Analytics analysis shows that we are still very much in a K-shaped economy. The top 20% of earners are accounting for nearly 60% of spending. So in your assessment, from your expertise, are we C or K?
Well, I too understand why he is sick of hearing about the K-shaped economy, because it is kind of emblematic of the nature of this administration's economic problems. You're in a situation, like I said, where for the average American worker, their wage gains, what gains they are making with respect to what they earn, are getting eaten up by inflation and then some. And you're in a situation where you have literal policy mistakes that this administration have made, like as Molly's talking about, the war in Iran, that you can directly tie to the increase in prices that they're feeling. And by the way, the signature tax bill that the administration keeps touting, some 80% of those gains go to people at the very top of the distribution. Those are also the people, 88% of the gains of the stock market go to the top 10%. So people are looking at this administration and looking at this economy and saying it feels like we're in a two-tier type of system where there is one set of rules and one set of gains for those who already have so much, and they're seeing themselves fall behind.
And we keep having to highlight that the stock market performance is not reflective necessarily of how people feel or what they're experiencing at home. Is the fact that Bessent is at the top of the K, so to speak, just emblematic of the detachment of this administration with what everyday people out there, I actually hate that term, what all Americans are feeling out there?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a cabinet filled with billionaires. It's like the richest cabinet ever. OK, there are billionaires throughout this administration, and Bessent, well, maybe not a billionaire, has many hundreds of millions of dollars and is quite rich. And so to have him say that they've ended like financial inequality, when that's very clearly not the case. And even when you had him up there, you're seeing Brent crude, the price of oil next to him. Like, that's something that if you're in, if you have less money, then gas takes up more of your budget. And I think there's a fundamental feeling in this administration that if you talk happy talk, like, people will go along with it because it works for Trump. But I do think, like, the split screen of Donald Trump totally focused on the reflecting pool and building a new helipad and all of ripping down the East Wing and fixing up putting his name on the Kennedy Center. These are like Marie Antoinette style things to be doing when the American people are clearly hurting.
And it seems like, many in MAGA looked at the cabinet that he was assembling and said, these are business leaders. Trump is a businessman. He's going to take care of us. He's going to take care of the economy, but they're experiencing something different.
Yeah.
Joe, Bessent also said that polling is bad just because there's so much misinformation out there about the economy. Inflation, though, was reignited, as we've been talking about, by the war in Iran, jumping from 2.4% in January and February to 4.2% at its peak in May. Also, there are higher gas prices that we've been talking about. There they are on your screen, thanks to the war, now hovering around $4 per gallon. Before the start of the war, it was actually below $3 a gallon, and grocery prices are remaining high. And as we also talked about, people are using their credit cards to pay for them. We're seeing several items, get a shock to the system. Tariffs are hitting people hard. How can Bessent tell people that they're not experiencing what they are, in fact, experiencing and what the data bears out, as we put up on the screen?
I hate to be a broken record. They're going to imitate and echo what Trump does. And Trump is just going to look the American people in the eyes and lie about the economy. And that's what Bessent did earlier, talking about income inequality. That's what they're going to do. They're going to try to fool voters into thinking the economy's doing great. And to what Molly said, she's spot on. I mean, my God, this president has used his presidency to enrich himself personally by billions. And contrast that with what the average American is paying for groceries right now. I mean, that says it all.